There's a $3 roll of foam tape at any hardware store that stops cold air from pouring through your window frames and door edges and cuts your heating bill by 10 to 15% permanently. Not by replacing your windows, not by upgrading your furnace, by sealing the gaps those appliances have been running overtime to compensate for since the day you moved in. Right now, as you watch this, heated air you paid for is escaping through unsealed joints around every window frame and door edge in your home. Cold outside air is flowing in through those same gaps to replace it. Your thermostat keeps calling for heat. Your furnace keeps running. And your energy bill keeps climbing, not because your equipment is failing, but because your house has never been properly sealed. A tube of paintable latex caulk costs $2 to $4 at any hardware store. A roll of adhesive foam weatherstripping costs $5. Government studies on American homes confirm these two materials cut heating and cooling bills by 10 to 15% permanently. That is $200 to $300. Back in your pocket every single year from materials that cost less than a single fast food meal. The window replacement industry charges thousands of dollars to solve a problem that $5 of foam tape pressed into the right gap solves this afternoon. The HVAC industry profits from furnaces running overtime in homes that were never sealed. Both industries have spent decades making sure you never learn the difference. If these stories matter to you, the subscribe button and the bell are the best way to make sure this knowledge survives. This is where we open the vaults the industry locked shut. Now let me take you back to where human beings first understood that sealing a building was not optional. Picture a Norse longhouse in coastal Norway around 900 AD. Timber walls, a low roof, and a fire burning at the center of a single room. Every winter, wind pushes through the gaps between logs with enough force to push smoke sideways and extinguish the fire. The Vikings took a mixture of mud and pine resin, pressed it into every joint between logs with their hands, and the wind stopped coming through. No hardware store, no caulk gun, just fingers pressing mud into gaps. The fire stayed lit, the room stayed warm, and the family survived the winter because the gaps were sealed. Medieval castle builders in England faced the same problem in stone walls and solved it by stuffing wool and horsehair into the gaps around window frames and door thresholds by hand. Workers in timber-framed English farmhouses pressed lime plaster into every crack around window and door frames with a flat blade. Craftsmen in Germanic regions dipped hemp rope in pine tar and hammered it into the seams between wall planks with a wooden mallet. Each region used different materials. Each builder used their hands to press those materials into the same gaps. Roman bathhouse builders cut stone blocks so precisely that a knife blade could not fit between the joints. Workers applying mortar to wall joints in Roman villas pressed it into every visible crack with flat iron tools before the mortar dried. Vitruvius sketched window openings with recessed frames and thick sills in De Architectura, specifically to reduce the gap between the moving shutter and the fixed wall. A Roman mason pointing at an unsealed gap in a freshly built wall and reaching for his mortar trowel was doing exactly what you will do this afternoon with a caulk gun. Then energy companies started billing by the unit, and a leaking house became a revenue source instead of a problem to solve. Walk through that same longhouse today, and you would see dried mud still pressed between the logs in photographs taken by archaeologists. The same logic that kept a Viking family alive through a Norwegian winter applies to the house you woke up in this morning. In medieval English, great halls, servants pressed fresh handfuls of wool into window frame gaps every autumn before the cold arrived. You can still see the evidence in restored castles. Grooves worn into stone window jambs, where generations of hands pressed fiber into the same gap year after year. In colonial American homes, housewives rolled newspaper into tight tubes and pressed them along the bottom of exterior doors before the first frost. The draft that woke their children at night came from the same gap that is driving up your heating bill today. Every civilization that built a closed structure and lit a fire inside it figured out within one winter that the gaps had to be sealed. They felt cold air moving across the floor, and they picked up whatever was within reach and pressed it into the gap. That instinct was correct then. The foam tape on the hardware store shelf is that same instinct in modern form. It costs $5 instead of a handful of wool. It lasts 7 years instead of one winter. And the gap it seals is the same gap that has been costing humans warmth since the first fire was lit inside the first closed room. Then fuel companies began billing by the gallon and the cubic foot, and a sealed building became a threat to monthly revenue rather than a survival skill. And window manufacturers discovered that a customer who believes their glass is the problem is a customer worth thousands of dollars. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and the bell so this channel keeps digging. Now here's the science behind why a $3 roll of foam tape outperforms a $10,000 window replacement for most homes. Hold your hand flat against a cold window on a winter night. The glass feels cold because heat is conducting directly through it, passing from the warm air inside, through the solid glass, to the cold air outside. Now hold your hand near the edge of that same window, near the frame where the moving sash meets the fixed frame. If you feel a stream of cold air moving across your palm, that is infiltration. heated air escaping through a gap, and cold outside air rushing in to replace it. Those are two different problems with two very different price tags. Conduction through the glass is real but relatively small. Energy. STAR data shows replacing an older window with a new energy-efficient one reduces household energy bills by around 12%. Infiltration through the unsealed gap around the frame is frequently larger, and a $5 roll of foam tape pressed into that gap eliminates it completely. The window replacement salesperson points at the glass. The foam tape fixes the gap the salesperson never mentioned. Government studies measuring heat loss in American homes found that windows and doors together account for roughly 25 to 30% of total heating and cooling energy loss. And in older homes, the majority of that loss comes from infiltration through unsealed gaps, not conduction through the glass. Sealing those gaps costs $3, replacing the window costs thousands, and leaves the gap around the new frame unsealed unless you add the caulk yourself. The industry sells the expensive solution for the wrong problem. In 1976, after the 1973 oil crisis sent energy prices soaring, Congress created the Weatherization Assistance Program specifically to seal air leaks in American homes. Crews went house to house with caulk guns and rolls of weather stripping, pressing foam into door frames and drawing beads of caulk along window edges. A 2008 retrospective study from Oak Ridge National Laboratory measured the results of that program across millions of homes and confirmed what earlier government research had predicted. Average annual energy savings of over $280 per household from basic air sealing, directly in line with the 10 to 15% reduction government studies had documented. Government research confirms these materials pay for themselves in 1 year or less. That means after the first winter, every dollar saved is pure profit for the homeowner year after year for the remaining life of the home. Window replacement companies generated approximately $15 billion in annual revenue in recent years, selling a product that addresses the smaller half of the heat loss problem. A salesperson who knocks on your door after a cold winter is trained to quote thermal efficiency ratings and point at the glass. They are not trained to hand you a $5 roll of foam tape and show you where to press it. That conversation pays them nothing. A furnace technician who arrives for a service call is looking at a machine running overtime in a leaking house. Sealing the house stops the overtime, extends the furnace life, and eliminates the next service call. That outcome also pays them nothing. Neither industry prints the federal weatherization data in their brochures. Neither industry mentions it in their sales pitches. And neither industry has any reason to start. Now, here's exactly what air sealing does and does not fix, because accurate information is the only kind worth having. Pressing foam tape into the gap around a drafty window frame stops cold air from flowing through that gap into your home. In a house with multiple unsealed windows and doors, the improvement in comfort after one afternoon of sealing is often immediately noticeable. If your home was built before 1980, it almost certainly has gaps around windows and doors that have never been sealed. If your home was built after 2000, modern construction standards may have already addressed the worst gaps, and the gains will be smaller. Weather stripping and caulk do not fix heat conducting through single pane glass. If your windows have only one pane of glass, the glass itself is losing heat regardless of the seal around the frame. And one important safety note before the practical guide. If your home has a gas furnace, gas water heater, or gas stove, those appliances draw air from inside the house for combustion. Sealing windows and doors, as described in this video, does not affect that air supply. If you plan to go further, sealing attic bypasses, basement rim joists, or other large openings, consult an energy professional first to confirm your combustion appliances will still have adequate air. Now here is exactly how to seal every window and door in your home this afternoon. Start by finding your leaks before you buy anything. On a cold, windy day, walk slowly along the inside of every exterior wall. Hold your palm flat near each window frame, near each door frame, and along the bottom edge of every exterior door. If you feel air moving across your hand, you have found a gap that is costing you money every day. Light a stick of incense and hold it near the edge of a window sash. If the smoke bends sideways or gets pulled toward the gap, air is moving through that joint. Try the paper test on every exterior door. Close the door on a single sheet of paper and try to pull it free. If the paper slides out without resistance, cold air is moving through that gap every hour the door is closed. For cracks between the fixed window frame and the surrounding wall, the joint where the painted wood frame meets the drywall or the exterior siding, load a caulk gun with a tube of paintable latex caulk costing $2 to $4. Cut the tip of the tube at a 45-degree angle. Press the tip into the gap, squeeze the trigger steadily, and draw the bead along the full length of the joint in one continuous line. Smooth the bead immediately with a wet fingertip pressed along its length. That seal lasts 10 to 20 years, accepts paint, and requires no future maintenance. For the moving parts of windows, the sashes that slide up and down in double-hung windows or swing open on casement windows, peel open a roll of adhesive foam weather stripping tape costing $5. Cut strips to length with scissors and press the foam firmly along the channel where the moving sash contacts the fixed frame when the window is closed. On a double-hung window, pay particular attention to the middle rail where the upper and lower sashes meet. This horizontal joint is the most overlooked gap in most windows and often the largest single leak point. On a casement window that swings open on a hinge, press foam weather stripping along the entire perimeter of the frame where the sash contacts it when latched shut. Foam weather stripping compresses completely when the window closes, creating a seal without preventing normal operation. Plan to replace it every 5 to 7 years. Compressed foam loses its ability to spring back and the gap silently reopens. For exterior doors, start at the bottom where the door meets the threshold. Hold your hand flat along the bottom edge of a closed exterior door. If you feel cold air moving along the floor, this is the largest single air leak in your home. A door sweep is a rubber or brush strip that screws to the bottom edge of the door and drags along the threshold as the door opens and closes. It costs $3 to $8 at any hardware store and installs in under 10 minutes with 2 screws and a screwdriver. For the sides and top of exterior doors, press V-strip weather stripping into the channel between the door and the door frame. V-strip is a folded metal or vinyl strip that springs open to fill the gap when the door closes. It is more durable than foam for a door that opens and closes 20 times a day and costs $5 to $10 per door. For the top horizontal piece of the door frame, the head jamb, cut foam tape to the exact width of the door and press it along the full length of that top edge. Once all 4 sides are sealed with V-strip and foam and the bottom edge has a door sweep in place, close the door and run the paper test again along each edge. If the paper holds firmly on all 4 sides when you try to pull it free, the door is sealed correctly. If it slides free anywhere, that is where cold air is still entering and heated air is still escaping. Homeowners who went through the federal weatherization program reported heating bills dropping by over $200 in their first sealed winter. Cold floors that had persisted for years disappeared within days of sealing exterior doors and windows properly. Furnaces ran shorter cycles, rooms reached the thermostat temperature faster, and houses held warmth through the night instead of losing several degrees before morning. Those results came from the same foam tape and caulk sitting on hardware store shelves right now. Viking hands pressing mud resin into log joints in 900 AD were solving the same problem a foam tape applicator solves today. Medieval workers, stuffing wool into castle window frames, were doing the same job a caulk gun does in 30 seconds. Government-funded crews did this work in 8 million American homes and measured the results. The window replacement industry built a multi-billion-dollar business model around homeowners who never learned any of this. A $5 roll of foam weather stripping and a $3 tube of caulk are on the shelf at your hardware store right now. They have been there for decades, waiting to do a job the industry prayed you would pay thousands to outsource. The cold air moving across your floor tonight is coming through a gap that seals in 20 minutes. The knowledge that stops that draft has been sitting in federal documents for 50 years. A window replacement salesperson quoting thousands for new windows has no incentive to mention the $5 roll of foam tape 2 aisles over. An HVAC technician writing a service invoice for a furnace running overtime has no incentive to hand you a caulk gun on the way out the door. The knowledge exists in federal documents published for 50 years. The materials exist on hardware store shelves at this exact moment. You can press your hand against the frame of the nearest window right now and feel whether cold air is moving through it. If it is, you've just found the source of the problem the industry has been charging thousands of dollars to solve. Foam tape pressed into that gap costs $5 and takes the length of time it takes to peel the backing and press it into place. Your furnace will run shorter cycles starting tonight. Your rooms will hold temperature through the morning instead of dropping several degrees before sunrise. And the money that has been leaving your bank account every winter for heat escaping through that gap will stay in your pocket instead. That is the return on a $5 investment. That is what 50 years of buried federal data looks like when someone finally hands it to you. The gap is real. The foam tape is real. If this vault opens something for you today, subscribe and share this video now. Every share puts this protocol in the hands of someone whose home is leaking warmth through gaps they never knew existed. Every subscription keeps this channel digging into the vaults they thought were sealed forever. Every like tells the algorithm that this information matters more than a window replacement advertisement. The next vault opens soon,